Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours, where we answer your questions 7 days a week. Let's go ahead and jump into those questions. Bill, what do we got?
John Snyder starts us off this morning from Reno, Nevada. John wonders, how would you troubleshoot an Atem Mini Extreme where the Atem setup software can find the device, but Atem Software Control cannot?
Go, Jesse.
We do this quite often using what we call the ping pong bing bong method, and that's just we ping pong and bing bong cables around, power cycle the Atem, plug the Ethernet into the router, try everything.
You do the little dance where the Atem dance? Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Do you have set music for it? That'd be great.
I'm humming while I do it, yes.
Yeah, exactly.
TikTok needs this.
Good, Courtney.
Well, I'm confused by this because if you run the Atem setup software, which is this, if it finds your Atem Mini or Extreme, it'll show up here, and this left little icon brings up the settings box, and this right little icon launches the software control. So if you just click on that icon, it should launch the software control with the data that was found in the setup, and it should take you into it. If it's not, I'm be very curious to know why.
Yeah, I mean, one question I'd have is, does it see it when it's connected via USB? It should. So that could be it. So if you're having trouble finding it over the network, it could be an IP issue of it not being able to find it. That can be a router setup of how it's looking at it. The setup usually is a little bit more robust than the software control about finding the switcher. But the first thing I would do is connect it via USB and see if that works. Like, does it actually see it over USB? I've never connected an Atem to a computer via USB and not been able to see it. So if that's the case, come back to us and let us know. Make sure it's not connected to something else. I would take the Ethernet out of it if you have it connected to Ethernet and just see if with a USB to a computer it sees it. Then start adding things back into it. So setup and software see it with USB. Then put the Ethernet back in. Does it still see it? Take the USB out. Does it still see it? And tell us where it broke. And we might be able to. But that's where I would just go back to kind of first principles and just kind of reduce the number of variables and start adding them back in. Next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. Up next, how would you do a motion capture of Tai Chi 10 minutes in real time that would be a useful training video?
Good, Bill.
Well, you say motion capture, and I always think in terms of video. To me, it's a matter of getting good lighting in something and having enough space. Tai Chi is a slow motion, full body exercise. The only thing I've done that's been close to that is we shot yoga. And I tell you, having a soft lit set, we had a triangle jib. I was directing this thing, and it was just magic to have something like an operated jib nearby, because you can truly drift across individual pieces of the figure. It makes it much less static. I know if you're doing some sort of motion capture, you probably just want static poses that you can then capture and turn into vectors and things like that. But to me, it was all about edge lighting and things like that to make sure that all the details of her hands as she moved her hands were crisp, and that we were able to really see body position perfectly, even when we went in close on something like a hand or a foot or a pose. Those are my 2 cents.
This is what it looks like when we are working on motion capture here. So this is Kevin. This is years ago. What is this? 2012, so 12 years ago. But what you can see here is we're calibrating the motion capture system. So this was a 36 camera Prime 41 system, and so it's and basically what you have here are 36 cameras that go around, and then we calibrate those cameras at different heights that you can see there. So you have, you can see these are going to get 2 different heights there, and then once those are calibrated, we put people on with dots. You've seen. I'm sure you've seen. If you've seen anything, let's see if I haven't. I think I just took a couple photos there. Then each camera, all 3 cameras have to see that one point, technically 2, to triangulate the position of that point in space. But generally we do it as 3. Now that system will capture, it's plus or minus typically a millimeter or 2 of those positions. And what we do is we put those points, the white points that are there, and I was trying to find a picture of it. I have somewhere here. I have that, but we take those points and we take. Here's a closer shot of the lens here. This is what that looks like. So it's an infrared camera, and the points are infrared. So that this is, and we have, this is, you can see them here. This is the calibration software. You can see them. There's a set we were doing a set there. So this is us setting them up in those poles with all these lights here. So they all have their own light, and then they see those projections there. And so then what we do is we take those points and we put them at your joints, and we create what we call rigid bodies. So we'll put points on a body, and we put, like, let's say 3 points, one on your shoulder, one typically somewhere in your middle of your arm, one on your elbow, and we'll connect those as rigid bodies. And the reason we do the rigid bodies is because it allows us, if we don't see a point for a minute, we can use the other points. We know we create a rigid relationship between those points, because we'll make the assumption that if the relationship between those points changes, you've had a horrible accident. So that's why we have it, it's on your long bones, it's on your head, it's on your hips. If the relationship between those points change, it means that something, really bad happened, and it shouldn't. That's what we call them. That's why they're rigid bodies. And so then what we're able to do is use, anytime we don't see that point, we're able to use the other points to correct it and to fill in those gaps as we start to put that together. And so then we have that motion capture there. Now, we had 36 cameras here. It can be done with as few as 6. We did for exercise for some software. The reason I have this motion capture system, ironically, was because I wanted to capture Tai Chi, which I never got around to because I was so busy using it to do exercise captures for an application. We did about 400 captures. So we brought in exercise experts, and then you could open it up on your phone and rotate it around while you're looking at it. As someone who has shot pictures of martial arts and exercise, and then shot video of martial arts and exercise, and then did motion capture of martial arts and exercise, motion capture is definitely the best. So it is the level of detail that you can get. And then the key is the user can rotate it around. And oftentimes what users will do is turn it to the position so it's as if they were standing either mirrored to the person or behind them, but they can look at like an angle, like I don't quite understand what they're doing with their hand or their arm or their whatever, and they can just simply interactively move it around. And I think that there's a huge market for this process. We have been doing martial arts motion captures for 20 years, like trying to figure out how to turn it into a product. And I think that now that USDZ is available, we're closer than we've ever been. But I think that it hasn't been that we don't know how to capture it. It's mostly been trying to figure out how to deliver it to people. And with things like Unreal Engine and things like USDZ and phones and all kinds and headsets and stuff like that, there's a lot of opportunity here to do some pretty interesting things. But one of the things we're looking at is things like Wonder Studio and Runway AI. I'm doing some motion capture tests of, can I just shoot video of somebody and have the AI turn that into motion capture? Both of those tools do a little bit of that right now. Of what I've seen, it's not nearly as accurate as what I'm used to, but it may be enough to get started, and it will definitely get better. So we went from like motion capturing people's faces to just video of people's faces, and it all got sorted out. So those are, I think that there's a lot of opportunity here. And I think that, the person who does the most of this is Nick Jushishin, who's sometimes on Tuesdays. But Nick has a motion capture system at Drexel, so he can actually do some of this. Maybe we figure out a way to do a test with Nick sometime in the school year for him. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I did find some. With the invention of AI, there are a number of AI tools that are out there now. Here's one from Rococo that just uses webcams, and I think they're using 2, but they do have some samples where they're using only 1 here, so that for free you can download and try this for free to do mocap with using AI to plot the limbs and the head and so on.
What a lot of these do, and what I see with the video that you're showing right now, They do big motions. What a lot of us will do is as soon as you let us, someone who does motion capture, play with it, what they don't do is big motions. What they do is they shuffle their feet and they move their arms around like a little bit like this, and they want to see. And usually it doesn't manage that well, because what we're showing is what's the error rate. Big motions, you don't see the error rate. So
it's subtle. Yeah, and subtle. Tai Chi is pretty slow, which is another problem that
you'll see any problem.
You can try this for free, but I think it's only limited to 15 seconds, which would be about 1/10 of your Tai Chi session.
Well, and I think that there is a huge opportunity. Like one of the things that that I'm looking at is one of the problems that people have when they go to a gym is, and I've worked in gyms for a long time, and now I'm back in a gym working out. I was out of a gym trying to do other exercises for a long time, and I've given up. One of the problems you get into it, you go to a new exercise, like pull down or bench or whatever, you don't really know exactly what the technique is, and it's just hard to, you don't want to ask anybody, you don't want to pay for a trainer, you have all these things, and people just don't use them. And I think that there's an opportunity. When I was in the gym 2 days ago, I was thinking about that there's an opportunity to capture video. And if we can motion capture quickly, relatively easy, the movement, you can now, you could theoretically have a character, and there are characters out there already for training, that you could motion capture in, and all the muscles are selectable. So you could literally select the muscles that are being used, kind of thing, and have that CG kind of overlay over top of it, with instructions on how to put it together. I think there's some interesting opportunities, in training. Again, I think that with motion capture, and definitely as AI, I would say that most of the AI tracking I've seen so far has been cute. That's the technical term for it at the moment. But I absolutely know it's going to get way better. And it will eventually bypass all these points. I'm sure that Vicon and everyone else will figure this out. I mean, I'm sure they're working on it, because every time we've seen this, we were able to model things, and photogrammetry slowly took over when it came to detail. We were doing facial capture, and facial capture just went to video. You don't even need any markers anymore. So to your point, Courtney, I think that we're barreling down a path that within 4 to 5 years, possibly within 1 to 2 years, this motion capture is going to be nearly as good as the real thing, and possibly better.
They do have this facial capture too. You can strap your phone to a little thing and holds it in front of you. It works with iOS or Android.
Yep.
And it does facial capture. It does a pretty good job. I'm not sure how accurate it is, like you say, and where you have to be dead accurate with some kind of motion capture for a video game or something. Tai Chi is not that precise movement. It may work fine for that kind of stuff.
Yep. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, it's just the detail, and that's what I was interested in. Alex, we had that person on who did the glove caption, because I remember some of the charm of what I shot with that was just these little things where a hand position just looks pretty. You can tell that this person has put a lot of detail into how they hold themselves, the tilt of their head. I remember all that from Tai Chi, and when I've witnessed it, it is very much flow from one state to another. So to get that accuracy, do you see the use of those kinds of things, gloves and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we can get a lot of the hand data without the gloves, but better, obviously the gloves are better. And I do think, and again, when we're doing motion capture of the body, like when we were working with some of the world experts when we did this app. We didn't do the app, we did the motion capture for it. And we were working with some of the world experts in kinesiology. So
kinesthesiology.
That we were some of the world experts at it. I mean, they're the ones that basically train college football players before combine. This is when it's when millions of dollars are on the line, these are the guys that they go to get trained. And the reason we had to be so accurate and so careful was because, a quarter-inch difference in where the hips were completely changed the exercise. It's hitting a whole different set of muscles. It's not doing what it's supposed to do. It can actually hurt you. And so it was very, very small pieces of data to make that actually work. It was, by the way, it was amazing to work with folks that know that much, because then they had certain trainers that are perfect at their form. And so that's who we were capturing. So you bring these incredible trainers in to do these exercises, and they were as precise as you can possibly imagine, doing it. And that's how they do it every day. And then we motion captured it. It was great. I don't know if the app's still out there, but if you, anyway, I'll see if I can find it. Next question.
John Foltz is in from Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania. Next, how does net neutrality affect the work most of us do? Is it something we need or don't need?
I go, Courtney.
Well, it may affect your wallet. One of the features, there are a lot of layers of net neutrality. One of the things is that they may or may not be repealing is the fact that, a common carrier, or is no longer a common carrier, but let's say Comcast is your internet provider. They could charge Netflix more to handle their data on their network than they would charge Amazon, let's say, if they make a deal with Amazon, or Amazon would charge less for their own content that they're streaming than they'd charge Netflix. And net neutrality was a law that made them charge the same price for everybody, so that they couldn't favor one streaming service over another. So that may affect you. And of course, if you run a podcast, there's issues about responsibility of whether the carrier is legally responsible for policing that network for, things that could be deemed illegal or you could be sued for liability. That it protected let's say the producers of this podcast from anything we say that could be libelous from being sued out of existence. And so we have to be very careful about that.
Good, Jesse.
There's a lot to unpack with net neutrality, and I don't want to unpack a lot. So when I'm talking about it and thinking about it, I like to think about it in the simplest terms possible. And in the simplest, like the most narrow view of net neutrality is that all information on the internet should be treated with equal priority. And a good analogy is with your telephone. If you're calling 911 or your cousin or a psychic hotline, all those are given the same priority by your phone company because they're not allowed to decide what's more important and what's less important. Seems pretty simple, seems pretty natural on our phone lines. But for some reason, this is up for hot debate on the internet. And the reason it's up for such hot debate is because there's billions of dollars at stake. If we keep the internet neutral, then there's this whole ecosystem of commerce that doesn't exist that people would really like access to by prioritizing some data and throttling other data. And this has a huge and negative impact on the user if companies are allowed to throttle data. So for a very good example of this is if you're on Spectrum and they're allowed to throttle data, why wouldn't they throttle the data from AT&T if you're looking for some competition for your Spectrum service if you're not happy with it? Why would they ever deliver you data from AT&T? And this is why something like net neutrality is as important for the data that we're moving on the internet as it was for the last 100 years of telephone service. And I really, really hope that people, civilian people, not businesses and governments, get on board with the idea that this is one of the most important debates that exists around the internet and the flow of information.
Yeah, in practicality, when net neutrality was removed, it had less to do with, what we didn't see a lot of was throttling. What we did see a lot of is services paying or making deals that made certain things for free over their network that they normally charge for. So it's not that they were throttling your data, but they were making some services free. And that was and of course it changes your behavior. So for instance, Verizon or T-Mobile would make a deal where you could, if you watch YouTube or HBO or something else, they wouldn't charge against your cell cap. So if you've got a 5 gig cell cap or a 22 gig cell cap, if you're watching, Apple, I don't think Apple did this, but Apple could pay millions of dollars or billions of dollars to T-Mobile. And T-Mobile will say, well, if you're a T-Mobile customer and you're watching Apple TV Plus, that's not the data that you use there is not going to be charged against your cap. And so in some ways it does, as Jesse said, they throttle you in some way because indirectly everything else does go against your cap. And when you hit the cap, then you're definitely throttled. And then you'll never get throttled for the stuff that is, that you're getting, from, and really where we saw net neutrality explode was related to cell phones. So Verizon with DirecTV or with the NFL or with other sports and T-Mobile. And I know a lot of, I'm very familiar with this because I streamed a lot of the shows that talked about the service, and so but that's where we really saw a lot of it. It does not generally affect peering relationships, which is between ISPs and so on and so forth. So that's where Apple and Netflix and Amazon and pretty much everyone pays the ISPs and puts servers in those ISPs to pay for that peering, and that's not affected by it. That has never been affected by any of the net neutrality laws. It is really where the net neutrality walls impacted it was on the end user. The real chilling effect of net neutrality is that it allows incumbents to pay a lot of money to stay incumbents. So it's very hard for an outsider to be able to provide that same service. Like we'll tell people right now, like if someone wanted to build their own CDN from scratch and raise money, anyone that works in streaming would say, good luck. Like you can't do that. Like that part of the world is over. Like building your own CDN is not possible because there's so much money and so much infrastructure with the existing players that's not a possibility anymore. You can do a federated solution using all those CDNs. You can put a front end on those CDNs. You can't be the CDN anymore. And so in the same way, it makes it harder for outsiders to build the next YouTube, build the next whatever, because net neutrality. I mean, when they're able to provide YouTube or Facebook, like a big popular one is Facebook. Facebook, in countries that don't have net neutrality, make all the Facebook services free and and they actually pay for the internet to be free. So if you have, they'll in India and Africa and many other places, you can get basic internet for free that's basically paid by Facebook. Because obviously they want you online, and so that it's not a really high quality service, but it is something that's paid for, and then of course you're part of the Facebook community, that's places where people will talk about, well, what about all the people that can't pay to give you that internet? Because it doesn't give you the entire internet for free; it gives you all the partners of that Facebook process, all the Facebook partners or all the partners that are related to it, the ability to hand you something for free. So you're not paying anything for it, but you are not able to necessarily get to every service or most of the services that are on the internet. And what I would say is that people argue that giving people free who can't afford it is better than nothing. And other people will say, well, but it also means incumbents stay incumbents. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, with the cellular network, I think it had to do, I don't know if it was the common carrier, if it came under net neutrality as far as data carriage, but there was something called MVNO, Mobile Network Virtual Operator, which because they were primarily monopolies in carriage, AT&T and Verizon and T-Mobile had to open their networks up to lower cost carriers like Mint Mobile and Spectrum Mobile. That are carried on the same networks as Verizon, T-Mobile, and AT&T, but they are deprioritized. So they allow them to deprioritize that lower-priced cell data traffic over the primary carrier, Verizon. So you're on the same network as Verizon, you're on the same cell towers, you have the same accessibility as far as coverage goes. But if it's very crowded at that time of day, your traffic will be deprioritized, in other words, moved to a layer access level, and your throughput will be throttled compared to the full, the Verizon users that are not deprioritized.
You go, Bill.
Yeah, and this is, it's hot right now, and I really appreciate Jesse's take on it. I feel the same way he does on a lot of things about this. I do know it's going to affect individual choice. We had a circumstance where I used to have every single streaming service because it was part of my business model to be able to monitor client spots and things like that. We are not doing that coming up in the next year, so I got rid of everything except a few services. Interestingly enough, one of them I chose not to subscribe to was Paramount Plus because I didn't have that much of interest on there. They kept hitting me to pay for it, pay for it, pay for it. I ignored all those ads. And then last week, I get a note from Spectrum, my cable provider, going, we're adding Paramount Plus for free. So it's a process of so much churn out there that it's hard for individuals to make decisions. And I do think that if you want to make your feelings known about net neutrality one way or another, it's up to you. Do it fast because this stuff is getting settled without anybody's thinking about it, and it's right now.
And it'll be interesting to see because you may see over the next 4 years, a whole bunch, to Bill's point, you may see a whole bunch of Paramount Plus and Apple TV and other ones suddenly become free on your Comcast. Definitely Comcast has its own things that it could make available. And the argument, or the sell point from them internally is, if people get it for 3 or 4 years, and this is why they're probably going to be pretty aggressive about it in the first year, once they have it, no one's going to be able to turn back to net neutrality, because people are now used to getting all these services, all these subscription services for free. And so they weren't mature when it was possible before. Now they're mature, and now they're fighting for market share. And so you could see a lot of, you could see suddenly on your Comcast or on your whatever, these services are all part of your subscription.
I agree. They're going to buy eyeballs for a while. They just want customer count.
Well, and the thing is especially if they're doing advertising, and again, it's more of a lock-in for the cable company. It's a whole bunch of things there. So, but you may see a lot more of that, especially for what they'll want to do is pay the carrier for the advertising version of their product. So there'll be the Hulu with ads or YouTube with ads. You won't be able to get the subscription one, or you have to pay for that. But for the free one, they want as many people to have access to it as possible. Next question.
Mike Edwards in Brooklyn, New York. Morning, everyone. What does the panel think of Aiarty's suite of tools, image enhancer and image matting for production?
I think it's Aiarty.
Oh, Aiarty. Aiarty. There's no L in there. You're right.
Yeah. So here it is. We haven't gotten a chance to check it because I didn't know it existed until you asked this question. But a lot of us, it looks like a lot of the things that we've used in the past. I think it's really interesting to see how this matting works, and if the matting works as well as they make it look. Which never is the case, but we'll take a, it definitely looks like it's worth playing with. I mean, anything that's going to do these image and matting. I think that they've been around for a while doing image matting. The image enhancer is new. A lot of us use Topaz. That a lot of us have invested in Topaz both for video and stills. So I'm going to try to, now that you've asked for this, it probably won't be today or tomorrow, but if you ask in about a week, I will have taken the same image into Topaz and into this, and we'll see which one wins. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I just briefly looked at it on their website, and it has this little demo here where you can roll for their image enhancer. You can roll the little line up or down and see, okay, that's enhanced and that's unenhanced. And I see very little different. Just around her eyes, you see the eyelashes get a little sharper in the enhanced version versus the unenhanced version. So it's awfully subtle.
Yeah, I mean the
demo. So
I think that the way to test it is to take something into Photoshop and enhance it, or to scale it up. Take it into Topaz and scale it up. Take it into this and scale it up. And look at those three images. Like, this was my source that was very small. I scaled it up 4x, let's say, and this is what the different services look like. You always want to, you don't really want to compare refined with finished. You want to compare the different products we already know, and how does it compare. And I think that the leader in this right now at a desktop level is probably Topaz, and so comparing it to Topaz would be where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. Next question.
Paul Wallace, Austin, Texas, up again. I have some content on VHS tape that I need to digitize. What tools and processes can do this, or should I use a service?
Go ahead, Bill.
B, use a service. And the reason I'm saying this, we've talked a lot about this over the course of time. These tapes are getting really old now, and old age does not do well with oxide glued to a Mylar backing, which is basically what all these are. If it's important to you, I would get it off as fast as possible. I would go to a professional service who know how to assess the tape and figure out how bad is it, because they're all going to be 10, 15, 20 years old by now. And that means it's been sitting somewhere and you have no idea how it was stored, whether it was humidity and temperature controlled, and they could be falling to pieces. If you try to do this yourself, you're going to run into all sorts of problems and end up burning up as many head cleaning tapes as you do machines to do it with, because I just think we're past the point of do it yourself. If you want to capture that, I'd go with a professional service.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, the question is, Paul, do you have a VHS machine that is still in good working condition and can play back those tapes without a lot of error, like Bill was talking about? Because those I have a whole cabinet full of VHS tapes over here, and I have one VHS player that I have not put a tape into in at least 6 years. So I'm not sure if they'll even play back. But if you do have one and you can play them back and they look okay on your TV, they don't have a lot of tearing at the top or a lot of noise in them, you can get something to do it yourself if you want to do it yourself. This Clear Click, which is a digitizer, it records H.264 onto a thumb drive that you plug into it. And it has all these inputs. It has composite video input, it has VGA input, and it has component video input. So if you've got a VHS player that has component out, you can try it into this and as an analog signal. And because it is a digitizing device, it does time-based correction on it on the way in. And you can get I've gotten pretty decent recordings out of something like this, and you just have to record it. Of course, it's all real time, so you're going to spend a lot of time playing back those videotapes in real time to capture them onto MP4s. But you can do it.
Yeah, I'd go back to what Bill was talking about too, though, is that I would be very careful. You won't be able to see the tape and look at it and go, oh, it's got a problem. Once you play it, even on a good VHS, if it hasn't been baked and it's old enough, you get to play it once and then that'll be it. You'll never see whatever was on it will never be there again. I have a tape that I'm trying to figure out the best place in LA to send it, but I'm going to send it to LA and have professional service. It'll probably cost me for one tape, probably cost me a couple $100 from looking at their website. And I think it'll be worth it because it's been sitting there for 30 years. Yeah, go ahead, Jesse.
Have you looked into Audio Mechanics? John Polito, he does audio tape and videotape restoration really, really well.
I haven't. I'll check it out. I mean, there's a couple services in LA that are, when I talk to studios, they're like, oh, this is where we go to get old tapes done. So I can't remember. I don't have it right in front of me, but I'm kind of just looking at, I'll pay whatever it costs to make it. There's one tape that I'll pay whatever it costs to try to get the data off of it because it'll be a great Christmas present for my family because it's an old family video. Go ahead, Bill.
And if they're still there was a company in Scottsdale not too far from where I live called iMemories that does this on a consumer level. Their thing was send your old 8mm movies and your videotapes, and they do 8mm, high 8, even DV cam and stuff like that. They are far less expensive than a couple $100 a tape, but again, it may be salvageable, it may not. They are not scientists. They are just a commercial service for doing this. So you might check out iMemories. I've never used them, but I drove by their facility a lot in North Scottsdale, and they have a pretty big operation for doing that.
Next question.
Kern in Maine, looking for a portable hard drive recommendation for an iPhone 15 Pro Max to save recordings directly. Thanks in advance.
One that what I've done so far is I've plugged in my iPhone to a Samsung T5, and that has worked fine. And those are older Samsungs. Generally, I don't think you can. I don't think the record speeds are more than you need. One thing to remember with most SSDs is they slow down a lot after they're half full. So a lot. So that's what you want to kind of, if you need a terabyte, get to that kind of thing. There are, obviously there are some. There are a variety of ones that are kind of built for this. Angelbird makes some specifically. One thing that I'm looking at right now that I've been considering getting for my phone specifically, and I haven't bought it yet, is this is Condor Blues module. So this is really ready to work with CF Express Type B media, and so you can just kind of plug your media right into it there. So it's something that, that's something I'm thinking about because of the kind of stuff that I'm doing. It's nice because you have I have a bunch of cards that are laying around that I'm not using as much anymore, so that they might be useful there. So that's something I'm looking at. But most small bus-powered drives will work pretty well, at least for the first half. You're looking for something that has read-write, and I would not get anything. I wouldn't buy anything that had read-write under 500 megs a second right now, which is amazing because I just want to kind of underline 20 years ago, maybe a little less than 19 years ago, we had to build a RAID from scratch to get to 225 megs a second. It was fast, and it was 133 gigs. And it was a lot. That was a lot at the time, so we can capture off the F950, and that was our little capture deck before we bought some X-Raids. And the fact that you can now just buy I'm sorry, I know that it shows my age, but the fact that you can just buy a card, that will do 2 or 3 times that is amazing. Next question.
Next one comes from Andy Kokendorfer in Viera, Florida. The new Shure MV7i with XLR and TRS mic line input. Is there a need for a mic as interface? And he's got a link to it there.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, it serves, I think they built this primarily for gamers because on the back of the mic, besides the microphone itself going into a USB converter, so the output of this has a USB here, but this is an input XLR or TRS combo jack, and as well as headphone out. So your USB interface, then comes your sound from your computer, comes out these headphones, and you can feed a line level input. So it's designed so that gamers can have a microphone and a line level audio from their computer or whatever, a game console that they're playing, can be fed into the internet. I guess you must have to use the software that comes with the Shure in order to control the mix level between the microphone and the line input. Or maybe you can just use the line input and bypass the microphone input as well. But I've not used it, but I think that's what it's aimed at.
I'm so confused. They have another MV7?
They do. Just as of yesterday at CES. It was announced yesterday.
Oh, no. So many. There's so many. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, so this was announced yesterday at CES, and I looked at it, and it's an interesting form factor. As Courtney noted, there's a big combo XLR 1/4-inch stereo jack on the back of it. So basically, the mic feeds your computer via the USB plug. You have headphones on board. So that's like one of those little mic interfaces that we've seen a lot of. But the difference thing here is that you can plug a secondary mic in. So somebody doing a 2-person panel show or something like that, and you want to be very mobile, I can see a purpose for something like that. You're doing a podcast from a remote location, and you just want to put a couple of cables, and your phone or laptop in there, and you're kind of good to go. I agree. The Motive app needs to run on something. So if it's the same device, maybe if you're using a laptop, I'm not sure I would want to try to balance audio on my phone during the course of a show where the phone was feeding the signal out. But, all this stuff is to be determined, and they think there's a market for this for young podcasters and other people who want to do 2 people in the field kind of shooting. So we'll see if it takes off.
I feel like Shure is becoming the audio version of Sony, which is that and what I mean by that is that they have a lot of high end stuff, and admittedly I'm using SM7B right now, but it feels like they're just hammering the podcast / creator market. This is a place that I think they've seen a lot of growth. We use we use a mixture of the SM7Bs, the MV7s, and now we're standardizing for 2025 for Michael Krasny's show on the MV6s because we can just send them out and they're not very expensive. But it's really interesting how they really nailed this market, and they're just really making sure that they're not leaving any air for anyone else to get anywhere near podcasting. I mean, it's clearly. At all kinds of different price points and connections. I do see the value of it. It took me a second. We only had them from the time you posted this to see it. When I saw it, I was like, oh, it's an MV7. And then when we started talking about it, I was like, oh no, it's another version of the MV7. And you can see, this is the model. It's actually pretty interesting. If you look at it here, one of the things that's interesting here is notice they're showing it like you can connect 2 mics to your phone to do a recording, right?
Yeah.
Or to your laptop.
A podcast.
So this is really, I want to do a relatively good record, and I have my backpack or my satchel or my purse, and I can put it all in there and pull it out and do an interview and what's great about it is at least we're getting something that's better than like those little labs and all kinds of the other stuff that, this is going to be a much higher quality audio for people. So I think all I would say is looking at the ease of that and what it looks like, I think that broadcast should be careful. Here they come. I think that
everyone's a podcaster now.
Yeah. So
literally everyone.
I mean, that makes it about as easy as possible. So I see the value in it. I mean, I still would, most of us here would like to have a good audio interface where we have a little bit more control. But, the creator market is nothing to be, Sony will tell you the creator market is nothing to be sneezed at. I mean, there's a lot of people out there making, and we talked about this a little bit yesterday. I think yesterday or last night. I can't remember what show I'm on when, but it's just incredible that so many people. The reason I think that the entertainment industry is in a lot of trouble is that so many people are making a living talking about things that they love, and that is lethal. That everyone, it doesn't cost millions of dollars to put together a movie. There's so many people that I know that are making $150,000, $200,000, $250,000 doing something that's so vertical and so specific that you can't believe it exists. But there's enough people watching it that that's all they have to do. And that level of content is pretty amazing. And it just makes it harder and harder to watch. It's just harder and harder to keep up. There's so much to compete with, and this kind of product just makes it easier. Next question.
Robert Green out of Los Angeles up next. I pick up my M4 Mac Mini last night. Any advice as I set it up to minimize the Sequoia pitfalls?
Go ahead, Jesse.
You're going to have to get over whatever antipathy you have towards reactions, because it's on, baby.
Oh, there's some kind of bug right now in Sequoia where it's constantly asking you to turn the reactions back on. And we think it's a bug because it's very un-Apple-y to constantly do that. Dante probably isn't going to work. I just took an M4 Mac Mini to a job site to use it, and streaming, I was outputting 1080p, 120 frames a second, out of it, and it was at 4% capacity, like 4% usage. I think it might have almost gone back to sleep. Like I can do this and sleep at the same time. So incredibly powerful machine, but Dante's probably not going to work very well. But outside of that, it's felt pretty stable to me so far. And I know that someone, Alex, Dante works for Alex. With the hardware chip dongle. Yeah, it always either works or doesn't work with the hardware chip dongle, but I don't think that Dante has been approved by Audinate yet. So I wouldn't expect it. Test it, Robert, and see how it works for you, and then let us know. Next question.
David Brady, New York City up next. David says, considering investing or asking the boss to do so in a Stream Deck studio, besides the form factor, what other benefits and potential pitfalls are out there?
So for those, the Stream Deck Studio is them kind of going up market. So basically, they're kind of getting into the market of where we a lot of times have Blackmagic or others that are building JL Cooper. So they're really going after this kind of larger, more installed market. You can see that they're taking the Stream Deck concepts and letting you kind of build these controllers out. Which is this form factor is much more built for the professional. So a lot of us have, I've got 3 Stream Decks on my desk that do different things. And so there's a lot of us have multiple Stream Decks that are doing things. Being able to put them into, what you're seeing here is the ability to put them into a turret. So these are what we call these oftentimes on a desk or turrets. And a lot of times the desks will sit, if you kind of look at it from the side, you have a desk and then you have a turret that kind of sits up like this and it goes back and it has gear in it, and it's a pretty common thing to put into broadcast. So they're going up market to do that. I think that it could be very popular. I have to admit that I just don't like, I obviously use Stream Decks, so it's something that it's not like I'm not using them, but my biggest complaint with them is that it doesn't have a lot of travel. So the buttons, when you're used to having turret-based, 1U button systems, most of those have a lot more travel to the button. And I find that to be more precise or more reliable than the way that the Stream Decks work. So I know a lot of people do production with Stream Decks and it's very successful. I don't find them to be as successful. Maybe it's just the way my hands move. But I put them in places where I use them, but I have them in places where they're not mission critical. Like they won't affect my show if I double tap or don't get a tab out of it. And I just wish that they'd build ones with better travel. But the whole concept of they have a screen and they put buttons on top of the screen, and that whole concept makes it hard for them to add the travel that I would want to see in it. So that's I think that's the pitfall. But I think that as a form factor, I can see how a lot of broadcasters, especially ones that have been using Stream Decks through COVID and so on and so forth, would love to have a 1U turret-mounted system. Next question.
Next question comes from Douglas Carmichael, and Douglas says, when working with neurodiverse crew and or employees, how far do you go when coaching them in communication patterns that others pick up on their own?
Go ahead, Bill.
Well, to me, there is no such thing as somebody simply defined by that condition or any other condition. It's an individual. So you always have to figure out, what does that mean for this individual person? I learned that I did a lot of volunteer work for people who had visual impairments, and I learned not to think of them in terms of that disability. You had to say, are you profoundly affected by this or partially affected by this? And if you individualize it to each individual person who you're dealing with, you'll find ways to work with them or find that their issue, their challenges make them more difficult to work for this particular task, and it might not work. That doesn't mean anything about them as a human. It just means you have to treat it person by person. That's my 2 cents.
Go ahead, Jesse.
A couple of thoughts on this. It's a subject very dear to my heart. The first thing is, people are very fluent in self. So the first step is to always just talk to the neurodivergent person. What I'm going to assume that this is somewhere on the autism spectrum. That's neurodivergent and on the spectrum seem to be almost interchangeable in casual conversation nowadays. And people spend a lot of time inside their heads. Opening the door to let them talk about what goes on inside their heads and their hearts will reveal a lot about how and why they behave the way they do. A lot of the energy being put into integrating neurodivergent people into a workflow is focused on outward behavior, and I think that this is a pretty big mistake in that effort. A lot more energy should be put into understanding how the world feels, how the world looks, and how the world sounds to the person who is neurodivergent, and that'll give you a lot of the answers that you're looking for on how to help coach them in the types of communication that you want to see on your productions. Keeping in mind at all times, a big old boat, you can't really turn it 90 degrees. You can turn it a couple of degrees, and that'll change the trajectory. Over the course of a week, if it keeps going forward, it'll be miles off from where it was on its original trajectory. So if you need to do a 90-degree turn, if there's a type of friction that's really destructive to the rest of your workflow, you might not be able to do a 90-degree turn in one afternoon, in which case you need to start thinking about how to extract them from that environment and get those degrees turned over time, and see if you can't get them miles from where that friction was being placed. It's in my experience, it's been universally worth the time and energy in the teams to get access to what's going on kind of behind that wall of neurodivergence. You take the time to talk, to understand, and to feel out how that person is processing the world. Because when you're investing in a team, you want as many solutions from as many different angles as possible. You want as diverse a team as you can possibly hire, because that increases your chances of finding a solution to a problem that you weren't able to access on your own from your one perspective. And the more work you put into getting access to different perspectives, the more solutions you're going to have access to as a producer. So it really is worth trying to turn that ship 1 degree and keeping that ship moving forward, so that you can find the places that everybody needs to be to work together.
Next question.
Paul Wallace, Austin, Texas, is up next. Would you use this AI tool to evaluate your media production business concept? And he's got a link to deepgram.com.
Go ahead, Courtney.
I probably wouldn't. There's probably a cheaper and easier way to do this if you're pretty good at crafting prompts into ChatGPT or Gemini or Copilot or any of the large LLMs that are out there. This company, a dime a dozen, you supposedly run your idea, submit your idea to them, and they use AI to analyze it and show you what the market's like for an idea like that, probably show you your competitors and so on. And with a craftily written prompt, you could say, show me all the companies that do provide this type of service and rank them by market cap, or by, if they're publicly held companies, or by annual income. And it will show you who your competitors are going to be, and if there's anybody else in the market that's doing that. I'd be very careful about reading their privacy policy, because when you're submitting new ideas in an entrepreneurial area, you don't want them harvesting those ideas and selling them to somebody else. So I'd be very careful with a company like this. I'm not saying they're doing that, but you got to be vigilant. And I'd try out my own prompts going into ChatGPT or one of the other types of LLMs first before handing my data over to a company that's designed to get a lot of ideas from a lot of different entrepreneurs.
Go ahead, Jesse.
The name dime a dozen really doesn't inspire confidence on my end for something like this.
Next question.
Fred Mayer in Los Angeles, California. Is there a way to Zoom-style mirror, in quotes, an external display attached to a MacBook? By mirror, I conceptually mean rotate the entire image on the screen 180 degrees in 3D terms. The reason is the set has physical graphics and can't be broadcast backwards.
Yeah, so if you need to rotate it. That's in your Apple desktop displays. So if you want to rotate your image, the Mac, just go into your desktop, into your display options, and you can rotate it 180 degrees, 90 degrees, 270 degrees. That's fine. If you're trying to flip it, the app that is probably the most popular on the Mac to do this, and I haven't used it in a long time because I usually use hardware to do this, but the one that's the most popular is called SwitchResX. So SwitchResX will do many things for your screens, but one of the things it'll do is do the horizontal flip to any output from your Mac. Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer in Viera, Florida. How will the new HDMI version 2.2 at 96 gigabits per second affect production?
Probably not much. Not anytime soon. This 96 gigabits may seem like a lot, but if you're doing 8K, you're now, that's going to get you there pretty quickly. So 8K at, I believe, 120 frames a second is what the H2, I think that's what 96, they'll get you to 96 gigabits per second. And so 2.2 is going to allow you to have, really do some high frame rate / high resolution solutions out there. And so that's probably the thing that is where they're trying to go. Of course, they're building stuff for, 2.2. Probably going to run until 2030 or 2028. So they're trying to think through what you might want for quite some time. So I think that's probably related to that. Next question.
Next question comes from Douglas Carmichael. A major airline puts in their job posts, quote, the use of ChatGPT or other automated tools during the interview process will disqualify a candidate from being considered for the position, close quote. Ever had experience with interviewees using it?
Go ahead, Jesse.
Not that we're aware of. As a business, you become very, very acutely aware of the fact that nailing the interview doesn't mean you're going to be able to nail the job. And I can totally understand why any company would be very sensitive to any tool that might let somebody game the interview system, knowing that they could completely wipe out when it comes time to do the actual job.
Next question.
Zach Stahlsmith in Chautauqua, New York up next. Does anyone use Adobe Publisher for creating company directories or something similar? And if so, pros and cons?
I have not used Adobe's Publisher. And I don't know why I would create a directory anymore. I mean, I think that I would have some kind of online directory. I don't know if I'd print one, just because it's obsolete the moment you print it. That's usually what happens with company directories. So I will say that I'm with Ryan's help, Ryan Rademan and a couple others, I've become very enamored with Airtable. So I'd probably be using Airtable to design some of the stuff. Airtable's like if you if you took FileMaker and then injected it with gamma rays and put it into the internet. That's what Airtable feels like. So anyway, I'm building a lot of stuff in it right now. Next question.
David Brady in New York City says, using an iPhone mirroring in Sequoia, how does one scroll and or swipe the emulated iPhone screen from OS 10?
I didn't know you could do that. So I don't know if I can tell you how, because I guess I've never, I will admit, I find the mirroring to iOS devices and the mirroring of iOS devices onto the computers to be very annoying. Mostly my experience is my new computers keep grabbing onto my iPads and wanting to turn them into a monitor, and suddenly my mouse disappears. I don't know what happened to it. I'm just like, my mouse is somewhere. I don't know where it is. And so a lot of these tools have, maybe I'm moving too slowly, but I don't like most of them. So I don't have a lot of skill set in this area. Go ahead, Bill.
I don't think you do it on the computer. You do it on the phone. You're mirroring the phone.
No, but I think that there is an emulated phone screen. There's a way to, I think I know what he's talking about. And I think that there is a way to have it show up and have it emulated there, and you can interact with it. So you can open your phone on your computer. I believe what he's talking about might be possible. I just know that
I wonder if a trackpad reads and a trackpad.
I've been kind of pushing back on it because it's just like, I don't like those devices. I don't like all these. I like a lot of the integration, but I actually don't have most of the integration between computers. Like, I don't have this whole thing where my mouse goes between computers or goes to my iPads or goes to any. I know that that's a big Apple thing that they spend a lot of time on, and I like everything to be in its own world. So I admit that I'm not as the only thing I use the mirroring for is mirroring my iOS devices to an Apple TV to show on the show. Go ahead, Courtney.
I'm not sure how it's done on the Mac, but on the Windows side, they have a similar feature with your phone mirrored onto your screen, and you just use the mouse to click and drag back and forth to go between screens or select things that are on the screen on your phone. And when you click on it on your phone, on the Androids at least, it shows up on your phone as that icon being selected.
Next question.
Rian Smith in Trinidad, West Indies. Is anyone keeping an eye on the Nvidia Ai being launched last night at CES? And if so, thoughts?
I watched the 12-minute version. Nvidia made some bigger cards and faster chips, as always. And it was amazing. And there's so many circuits, and they're so fast. They have a new the 5070 is out. The 5070 is twice as fast, and it's as fast as the 4090, I think, but less money. There's a $2,000 version of it that looks like it would be amazing. You could probably render the world in. So it looked impressive. Even with probably one of the best presenters up there, the thing I was left with is, I really don't like watching stage. I would never watch the whole thing. Like the 12-minute version, I still was skipping through. Like I was still like, nope. Like, so I didn't watch the whole thing because even at 12 minutes, it was too long. Stage presentations and keynotes are done. Like, they're just cooked. You could put a fork in them because he's probably one of the best presenters out there, and it still wasn't worth the time. And that's the problem. I just want to watch a video about it. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, Meta is abandoning fact-checking in the U.S. in favor of an X-inspired community notes model. Is this a step back or forward? And he has a link there to an article in The Verge about it.
Go ahead, Jesse.
So what this does, as I understand, is shift the burden a little bit away from the platform and more onto the community to check tweets or posts or whatever X's, whatever they're called these days. Whether or not this is a step forward or backward is really dependent on the community that is fact-checking the tweet. And as the pools of who's using which platform shift in different directions, that will be what defines the quality of this fact-checking that's going on. And yeah, I'll leave it there.
I think that the X one has been really effective. Like, it's been super effective, probably more effective than anything I've seen so far. Like, the community notes underneath it, you go, oh, right. Like, it's someone said, there'll be some kind of crazy tweet, and then underneath it, someone will go, yeah, that's not really true. And I think that has actually worked fairly well. So it'll be interesting to see what happens for Meta. Last question for the hour.
Last question from Matthew LeCount in Oakland. Is there a method to mirror the internal LCD of Blackmagic's Pyxis, including the menu system, for education?
I think it's highly unlikely. One of the things that I wish more companies did for education and for a variety of other reasons would be to make their displays available via USB or something like that. So you plug it in and an output could be the display, which means it could be larger if you're sight impaired. It could be, there could be a bunch of other things, but more importantly, I could send it into a switcher and then you could sit there and look at it and I could sit there and talk about it. And I think that from a training perspective, the number one reason that the number one coding platform in the world is Python, or the coding style is Python. And 70% of the folks that say they use Python, they use it because the best documentation on how to use it, because there's so many resources out there. They know that they can find something that'll do it. I think that companies need to get much better across the board at building training and building the facilities for people to build training about their products. It's very hard to teach someone how to use a Mix Pre 3 because the screen is so small, and I got to sit there and shoot it, and it's painful. And if it outputted the screen somewhere else, it'd be really useful. Yeah, go Jesse.
Are you aware of any reason they don't do the screen mirroring on Blackmagic cameras?
It's another request of the video engine. It's probably not a big request, but it probably would change the price, or require a different chipset. So that's probably why they do it. Thanks to the panel. It's great having you all here today. I can't do this without you. And thanks to all the great questions. If we didn't get to your question, we send it either back to you, so you can find it in your notes inside of Makana, or we send it back to the QR code, which we'll try to get to tomorrow. But thank you so much for all the great questions and driving this conversation 7 days a week. We haven't missed a day since March 25th, 2020. So we're approaching our 5 years of not missing a day. But we really thank all the panelists and all the great questions that came in, and thanks, of course, to the incredible team on the back end, the people who are editing, managing, developing, all of those things to make this actually possible. And it's a pretty miraculous thing, and it's definitely a village that creates that miraculous thing. So we really appreciate all of your contribution today. If we had done this person to person to person, the Tlaloc traversal, we would have traveled 27,000 miles. That's 43,000 kilometers, and that is 212 million bananas for scale. All right, let's go ahead and jump into After Hours. It's really easier on Sunday. I have the Tlaloc traversal in a screen on the show. I've got to figure that out. Maybe we could swap out the Tuesday, the slate for the Tlaloc traversal at the end. That would be...
Oh, so we could read it off of that.
Yeah, like that page. Maybe that could swap out or something. Because I kind of have this, because of the way my screens are set up, I'm kind of looking down where I could...
Yeah, I have to read it out of the corner panel chat as well. That's less engaged.
Yeah, something to think about. All right, everybody.
Will I post it, or is it just an algorithm?
It gets posted, but it is an algorithm, and it gets posted.
I just wonder where it's posted.
It's posted in our panel chat right now.
Robert posted it in there, but I wonder where he gets it. That's what I was curious
about. It's something that Chad calculates, but I don't know. To be honest with you, I don't know where it shows up.
It's magic.
Yeah, magic. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Thanks.
Manana.